1. My grandmother died around a year ago, and behind her she left a lot of mourning relatives, and an old house that isn't too far away from my childhood home. She also used to have a cat, but the cat was put to sleep soon after grandmother's death, because the cat was very old and in a lot of pain already. During last Christmas holiday I travelled back home, but since my own room is basically a storage by now, I decided I'd rather just spend my time alone at grandmother's old house, where I could do my work in peace and quiet. Mother does some of her freelance work in that same building, and she has messaged me multiple times during the year how she feels like someone is there with her, and how she can hear sounds similar to a cat jumping up and down the living room table. I really understood what she meant by that after an hour of sitting in the kitchen of that house and working on my own things while listening to music. First I thought I was hearing my own, but the constant pitter-patter of paws and the sound of something jumping up and down the tables and sofas was so loud I could hear it through my music. And it would occur again and again at random intervals and with different patterns. The house is next to a busy countryside road, so it shakes whenever a big truck goes by. But this sound was definitely very different from those usual noises. There was no pattern or predictability to it, and at some moments I really had to remind myself, there really is no cat in this house anymore, and hasn't been for a year. During the same day, I remember hearing an odd noise from the larger bedroom. There are two in total, a smaller and a larger one, and the living room, and the thought of someone actually living here in secret really crossed my mind. The house is kept warm, and has multiple closets and places to hide, if you really want to after all. I tweeted about this on my Twitter while it was happening, and for joke value I grabbed a kitchen knife and walked around the house with it while checking all places, and comically tweeting about how I was a horror game protagonist now. I checked all the places with obviously no results, but when I walked to the larger room, I noticed one of the closet doors was open. I checked the closet, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so I just closed it and assumed it had been opened by the shaking of the house, due to the road nearby. I did check under the bed though, just in case, but nothing in the room caught my eye. It was all very neat and orderly. A couple of hours later, Mum came to pick me up, and she went to get something from the larger bedroom. She then called out to me and asked me if I had been lying on the bed there. Entering the room, she pointed at the messy bed, with clear signs of someone or something having been there. The pillows were all over the bed and the bedsheet wrinkled considerably. The closet door was open again. I think what bothers me most about this is the fact I have always felt weird about the house, even when grandmother was alive. Not particularly spooked or anything, but I would often see eerie dreams of me being in that house. After grandmother's death, I have seen more of them, and sometimes I even see dreams of her, telling me she has something important to tell me. But I never get to hear what exactly that is. During this week, I have returned to that house in my dreams twice now, and though it's probably nothing out of the ordinary, it really does make that whole experience a tiny bit more eerie. 2. I currently live in a hotel turned dormitory. The hotel was extremely popular in the 30s and 40s, until around the 70s. Since then, it's been converted into a number of things, from a home for the elderly, AIDS patients, homeless shelter, a home for political prisoners, and now a dorm room. So there's a lot of history to this place. Now on to my story. A couple of weeks ago I was smoking with a friend when I had a horrible panic attack and decided to retire to my room to write it out. I turned off the lights and tried to go to bed as I was starting to come down from the attack. As I was laying there, I heard a noise that sounded like my roommate was coming home. I looked up only to see a little boy, around 8 years old, standing by my door. I could only see him from the torso up. From what I could make out, it looked like he was wearing a sailor suit, like one of those costumes little kids would wear in the 1800s or so. Needless to say, I freaked the fuck out and suddenly he was gone. I told my roommate about it, and he told me to write it off as a bad high. Now, it's important to note that my roommate has grown up a strict Catholic, and isn't really comfortable or believes in anything paranormal. So I figured I was just seeing stuff, but as much as I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling I had. So the next day I was telling my roommate about it even more, and how freaked I was, only to be met with his discomfort. Sensing his discomfort with the topic, I dropped it. Shortly after our discussion, my roommate goes to the bathroom, and while he is in there, I see all of his stuff in the cupboard under his bed fall out. Now I'm talking about all of the stuff in there falling onto the floor, with such force that I couldn't help but let out a little scream. My roommate comes out of the bathroom, sees his stuff all over, and even he admits that this was starting to creep him out. The next weird experience started happening the day after my roommate's stuff fell. The lights in my room started to flicker constantly, which, all in all, isn't that weird. The light bulb could have just been dying. We've been living there for like 6 months without changing it. But I felt like I had to mention it. The weirdest thing, though, was my phone acting up. I never have had problems with my phone outside of the room, but when I would come home, it would glitch like crazy. For example, at night I was listening to a song on Spotify when it repeated as the song finished. No big deal, I figured. I went to click the next button, and the same song showed up. I tried like 3 times and the same song kept coming up. I just closed Spotify, then it managed to work. Although, when I was on the phone with my mom talking about what was happening, I felt my phone vibrate as I got a text. I went to see who was texting me, and I noticed the screen on my phone was going black. Then back to normal. Then flickering back to black, and so on. This really freaked me out. The absolute creepiest part of this all was revealed to me 2 nights ago. My roommate's friends were staying with us, and I of course brought up what has been happening. My roommate's friend looked at him and mentions a dream he said he had a few weeks ago. Now I know dreams don't belong here, but I feel like this is an essential part of the story. I was super confused because he never mentioned anything to me about a weird dream. So my roommate tells me that a few weeks back, he was having an episode of sleep paralysis, which according to him only started when he moved in here. I also have been having weird dream and sleep paralysis experiences lately too, but I won't get into it. Anyways, he was laying there staring at my bed with me sleeping, unable to wake himself up. He said he saw a small, childlike figure standing next to my bed, almost watching me. He couldn't make out any details of it, but could definitely tell whatever it was about the size of a child. I was so freaked out, and was definitely afraid to fall asleep that night, knowing there's something in here watching me. That's really all there is to the story. I'm sure more experiences will come up as time goes on, but I really wanted to share my time with this little sailor boy ghost with you all. 3. A lot of people I know tend not to remember things from their younger years, but I tend to remember everything. Mostly things I wish I didn't remember. I remember being 5 and I was staying at my grandma's house, sleeping in my aunt's room. It was a very small room with the bed facing the door and a window directly behind the bed. Looking out the window, you could see down the street, and I remember when I was younger, loving to watch all the nightlife down below. My grandma had just tucked me in and shut off the light, closing the door behind her. As soon as I was sure she was back in the living room, sitting in her chair, watching her shows, I jumped out of the bed and turned to the window. As I was watching the people below, something caught my eye. There was an overlapping rooftop directly under my aunt's window. My grandma used to tell me stories about how my aunt and my mom climbed out the window to sit on the overlap. Scared the shit out of her. But anyways, something caught my eye and I saw a dark figure crouched on the rooftop below my window just to the left of me. I stared at it for what felt like forever. Not really scared, just more curious about what this might be. As I watched it, it started to come closer to me. Couple inches every couple of minutes, and yet I couldn't take my eyes off of it until it was right up under me. At this moment I plopped back down into my bed, my heart racing so fast I almost couldn't catch my breath. A million different things rushing through my head. What is that? Is it going to hurt me? And why couldn't all the people below on the street see it? At that moment I jumped from my bed, rushing without looking behind me to where my grandma was resting watching her shows. Unable to catch my breath to tell my grandmother what I had seen, I pointed to my aunt's room and said, "It's in my window." She looked at me confused but saw the fear in my eyes and slowly got up from her chair and walked into the room. I stood frozen in fear as I watched her disappear into the dark room. It seemed like days before she returned. But when she did, I did not get the response from her I expected. I yelled, "Did you see it, Grandma?" And with a smile on her face, she sat back down in her chair and began to explain to me that sometimes people can see things that other people can't. And that if I gave the things I was afraid of a name, it wouldn't seem so scary. And with that, sent me back to bed. I laid in the bed, staring off into the darkness, very confused about what my grandma had just told me. Then slowly drifted off to sleep. I awoke later that night, feeling as though something was staring at me. I sat up in my bed to see the thing from the rooftop standing at the end of my bed. Right before I screamed in complete and utter terror, I remembered what my grandma had told me. So I stared at it, and it stared right back at me. It wore clothes just like a man would, but was so clearly anything but. The best way I could ever describe him was the demon off of Jeepers Creepers, but no wings nor hair, and his face didn't come apart. His eyes were completely black. We both stared at each other for a long time, and then I softly mumbled, "Jeffrey." The thing smiled at me, and that was when I saw his pointy, sharp, scary teeth. At the age of 5, it should have scared me a lot more, but it didn't. I named him, I felt relaxed, and was no longer scared of him. With that, I laid back down and fell soundly asleep, waking up to tell my grandma everything. I have seen Jeffrey many times after that, but then I started to see other demons as well. They always seemed to be following someone around or standing outside of people's houses. I don't know what this means or if there's anything I can do about it. It doesn't really scare me anymore. Just kinda got used to it. 4. So when I was about 17, my mum started opening up and telling me about her childhood. She told me heaps of personal stuff, which is quite private. But there is some stuff I'd like to share. So apparently, as far back as she could remember, she has had night terrors. Waking up to my mother screaming was something I grew to accept as a child. There was never anything wrong, just her having a nightmare. Then she hit me with the shadow man. She told me that she would wake up every night to a tall shadow man leaning over her. She would scream, my pop would run into her room, and the shadow man would disappear. I have to make note here that she called him the shadow man. I got shivers and, quite honestly, shit myself thinking about it. But then her description started getting weird. She said that he was really tall, red-eyed, and wearing a fedora. When she said fedora, I thought she was mad. A demon spirit thing wearing a hat was one of the silliest things I'd heard of. I reasoned that she had watched an old black and white movie as a kid, with a character wearing a fedora, and had imagined it all. Fast forward a few years later, and I'm thinking of it. I decided to Google Shadow Man. Imagine my surprise when I find that what she was talking about was happening to other people. What the fuck? A few notes to add. Mom claims Shadow Man haunted her until she was 18 and got with my dad. Dad was spiritual. I don't know if this helped. She has never been on Google. I don't know how she could have known about the fedora and everything. Plus, I see no reason for her to lie about something like this to me. I never had access to the internet at the time to verify her claims. My mum had an operation a few years back, and was pretty fucked up when she got home from the drugs. Her bedroom window was pretty low, so you could see inside from outside. My brother walked past her room and could hear her telling someone to leave her alone. He looks in her room and there's a shadow figure in there. She has no memory of this. What are these creatures and why the fuck do they wear hats? 5. Back when I was 15, about 9 years ago, I was heavily religious. I gave small talks in my church, knew the Bible back to front, and was given certain responsibilities in my church. So when a woman came to my church asking for help to stop some weird phenomena happening around her house, I volunteered to go with the group who was sent to investigate. About a week before the woman came to our church, she made some small and unassuming purchases at a local second-hand store. The first night she woke up with some unexplained marks on her body. The second night she heard whispering coming from her spare room, but unsure if it was real or part of a dream. The third night, she had a terrible and realistic nightmare that caused her to wake up in a cold sweat. When she sat up in bed, she noticed something that shouldn't be happening. The lamp she bought from the second-hand shop was floating around the room. Little bit of information. Spirits do not exist in our religion. Once we die, we cease to exist. Anything paranormal that happens can be attributed to demons. The next day, she contacted her nearest church, which was us. The church sent 4 of us, myself included, to help her. We got a normal-looking house in a normal-looking neighborhood, in the middle of a normal town. The inside of her house was well-lit, pleasant, tastefully decorated. Normal. Nothing out of the ordinary here. So I was beginning to think we were wasting our time. At this time I thought demons were more allegory than literal. I believed they were evil personified. The 4 of us went into the bedroom in which the lamp was kept. She moved the lamp from her bedroom into a second spare room, not the one where she heard the whispers. And nothing out of the ordinary stood out to any of us. Getting annoyed at both my hopes of seeing something supernatural disappearing, and bored because nothing interesting was happening, I started to wander the house, which is when I stopped at the whispering spare room. This is where things took a turn. Walking past the doorway of the spare room was like walking past a void. It was colder than the rest of the house, shadows seemed darker, and there was an unnatural feeling upon actually entering the room. I stepped into the room without alerting the others in my group of the strange nature of this room. The minute I crossed the threshold into the room, I was overwhelmed with this feeling of unimaginable hatred. A strong, primal fear, unfathomable anger and jealousy, a feeling which I never seemed to be able to feel or understand until that day. It seemed instinctive, yet at the same time these feelings weren't coming from me. I knew of some of the feelings. I experienced a primal fear earlier in my life when I was chased by a pack of dogs. But I didn't know others, like jealousy. I knew of it, but I couldn't understand it. I just stood in the room for what seemed like 5 minutes, when I became aware of something standing behind me. It was tall, it was thin, and it was where all those feelings originated. It was then I started to scream out to the others in my group, and then I turned around to see what it was. The room was empty. As the other people in the group made it to the door, they all commented on the otherworldly darkness and the unmistakable anger and hatred emanating from the room. This is where the strange phenomenon originated from. Therefore we concluded that whatever she brought home had something attached to it that was slowly permeating through the house. We took everything the woman bought from the second-hand store, with her permission, to be incinerated, which stopped the strange phenomena in the house. But memories of that room still haunt me today. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 39. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed their story to be used in this video. Not to worry, there will still be another paranormal video on Friday, and hopefully if all goes well tomorrow, we'll have episode 200 of 3 True Scary Stories going up. Okay, I'm actually very tired right now, not operating on much sleep, so I'm going to head off, get these videos edited and uploaded, and I'm just going to be lazy for the rest of the night. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.